Hi there. Maya presented a really great question for us to think about in our Q&A, where we get a chance to talk about terms for the properties of artwork. She honed in on the Smart History video discussing how to formally analyze, something you are now practicing doing, and that one of the art historians mentioned that pattern is often in conflict with pictorial space, or even denies it. It's a really important concept, so I appreciate her saying that, she didn't feel like she was sure exactly what that meant. And she says here, does it just mean that the combination of creating a pattern in a painting while also trying to create the illusion of space within the 2D painting is difficult to effectively achieve? Yes. And let's look at why. Pattern is about repetition in a pattern, right? A repetition that follows a system and that does it consistently to be systematically. So this quilt by Martha Knowles and Henrietta Thomas is pure pattern. It's all about the patterning of yellow squares against squares that use white and colors. And so pure pattern like this is always insisting on the two-dimensional surface because everything is evenly interacting. When artists like Raphael want to create an illusion of three-dimensional space, a sense of pictorial space, they have to make you, the viewer, forget that this panel is a flat surface. So they're really going to avoid pattern because they want you to feel as if you're looking deeply into a complicated landscape. And so they're interested in the changes and the subtle modulations of forms in the foreground versus those in the background. You could say that the trees have a slight hint of patterning because they have the same kind of feathered, leafy forms, but they're not a pure pattern. If Raphael put on Mary's dress the yellow and colored and white squares in diagonals that you saw in the quilt, it would actually cancel out the feeling of her body being three-dimensional. It would cancel out the feeling created from the shadows and the light creating her bosom, creating the waist going in, because it would create this evenness and predictability. We're obsessed with creating a consistent, utterly believable pictorial space. That was a way for them to make the painting seem to be a window onto the real world and make us feel as if we are witnessing real people in this sacred Christian scene. But notice, since we're talking about pattern, that this artist van der Weyden is so good at illusionism and three-dimensional form that he actually can put a patterned piece of fabric and make it believable, because he can show us all the twists and turns of the folds of the fabric, the way the shadow catches and the light catches, the feeling of the heft. So he's actually able to show off taking a two-dimensional pattern on a three-dimensional object and making it believable as both. So let's think about this question of pattern versus pictorial space with one more example. This was painted in 1488, basically around the same time that Roger van der Weyden painted the Christian scene I just showed you. This is not an oil painting on a large panel. This is painted on paper. It is a painted book, a manuscript, and it is an Islamic sacred artwork showing Yusuf, or Joseph, being chased by the wife of his master. Her name is Zuleika. She's trying to seduce him, and he's very honorable, so he's running away. It's sort of comical and fun. It's also very beautiful. But in terms of pictorial space and pattern, notice that the Islamic artist combines the two but differently than van der Weyden, combines the two with a strong emphasis on pattern. There are enough features that suggest pictorial space, such as the orthogonal lines, that we can read a stairway going up and back. Overlap to suggest the doorway into a room behind. Again, orthogonal, so that this balcony seems to project. Orthogonal panels, so that this chamber also seems to go back. But over and over again, the artist delights in the intricate rhythm and repetition of pattern and its two-dimensional qualities, its flatness, the flat forms of the calligraphic lines, the flat forms of these floral motifs repeated, or these blue and white, so many beautiful patterns upon patterns. And if we look at them up close, we see that in a way they overpower the the pictorial space, the suggestion of three-dimensional space, because there's a kind of glory that's being expressed through the pattern. So my point here is that different historical periods and different cultures will emphasize flat pattern or three-dimensional pictorial space to different degrees for different purposes. And often it will be very interesting to ask why they are doing what they're doing with pattern or pictorial space.